Good evening, everyone. Grace and peace. Welcome to the table. And I just want to name whether you are rich or poor, gay or straight, like a long-time believer in Christ, or just very new to all things God and Christian and spirituality and all that. We are just glad that you've joined us. So thank you. Thank you for being here with us tonight. So the title of my message is The Endless Lessons of Manna and BBQ. And we're going to be in Exodus chapter 16. So last week, we looked at the story of Moses encountering God in the burning bush, and we discussed basically how that wasn't simply a snazzy God experience for the sake of giving Moses goosebumps and giving him a cool God moment. Rather, it had a purpose, right? It was a call, it was a commissioning, a sending of Moses. So basically, Moses, he was called to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. And so over the next 12 chapters or so, that's basically exactly what happens. And if you're familiar with the story, you'll remember like all the plagues that befall the Egyptians, and then the parting of the Red Sea, and how the Israelites cross over on dry ground, but then the walls of water crash on the Egyptian army. Even if you haven't read it in the Bible, maybe you've seen the handful of movies that have kind of unpacked the story. So it's a moment of, it's a lot. It's a moment of profound deliverance, freedom, kind of breakthrough. But alas, you cannot stay on the proverbial mountaintop of victory forever. Eventually, we all must descend into the valley of testing, of maturing. So the whole kind of caravan travels 3 days into the desert. And their animal skin water pouches run dry. The people begin to freak out. God then provides water. They travel another week, maybe two, and they reach the desert of sin. Here's a picture that I think Scott's going to put up there. As you can see, not a lot happening. Wouldn't call this prime vacationing area. It's just, it's not a great spot. So it's in this wilderness where they begin to run short on food. And so we pick up the story there. This is verse 1 in chapter 16. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. You'll recall, of course, Moses is the leader. Aaron is his, I think, brother-in-law and kind of sidekick. So the whole community is grumbling against them. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted." Later, rabbis would comment on this and say, "Do you notice they said that we sat by the pots of meat and ate bread? By the meat, bread." And they kind of described it like, I wonder if it was that the Egyptians were eating the meat, and they, of course, were the slaves, so they ate the bread. But, at least they were there. At least they lived in the land of luxury. So they're kind of looking back on their past. Isn't this what we do? We look back with the kind of rose-colored glasses. Oh, the good old days, There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Now, in a sense, this passage really kind of encapsulates the entire story of Israel's years of wandering in the wilderness, because yes, it does in fact turn into years. They have left the land of oppression. They have left a regime of enslavement. And we could say that their problem is that they are not grateful. Right? I can imagine a pretty good sermon about how the Israelites were grumbling rather than grateful, with a little GG alliteration. Grateful. Preachers love that stuff. And that would certainly, that would be true, right? That's definitely there. It's never bad to remind us human beings to be grateful. It seems our minds, we're pretty attuned to the negative. We're kind of scanning the environment for what's wrong and going poorly. But instead, I don't really want to go there tonight. Instead, I want to go well, I'll call it, I want to go a little different direction, maybe even a little deeper. And I want to ask the question, like, what has gone on in their past? What wounds have occurred to their minds, in their souls, that would lead them to say completely unreasonable things like, you have brought us out into this desert to starve us all to death. Like, imagine you're Moses. All that you've done, all that you've put on the line for them. Like, yes, that's it. Wow, you got me, guys. I have risked life and limb, I can imagine Moses saying, to bring you to this moment, and here we are all gonna die. That was my plan, my little joke. Good one, huh? Like, sure enough, God's done all these miracles, parting the sea and all. Yep, to bring you right here to die. Like, come on. No, of course not. This is ridiculous. But of course, it sort of begs the question, like, what is going on? Why are they doing this? So I think we get a hint of the answer in not simply the sheer fact that God provides for them, as you'll see he does, but how he provides. Verse 4, then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. So how does this go? Well, we find out pretty quick, jumping down to verse 13. That very evening, quail came and covered the camp. So he gives them meat in addition to bread. And in the morning, there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, what is it? For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, and that is literally what manna means. Like in Hebrew, it literally means like, what is it? Like, hey, Bill, grab me some more, what is it? And that's what manna means. Moses said to them, it is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Verse 16, everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent. That's about like 9 to 10 cups or so. The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little, and when they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Then Moses said to them, no one is to keep any of it until morning. However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Verse 21, each morning everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. What is going on here? Is God trying to teach the Israelites to be grateful, trying to teach them not to grumble? Yes, you could say that, but is that the main thing? What is their problem? What is the deep wound? What is it that they lack? And this will recur again and again and again throughout the entire book of Exodus. I'll sum it up for you in one word: trust. God is adamant that they learn to trust. If you're a note taker, for those committed few who are still, you're in your homes, you're taking notes, God bless you. And so you can write this down. The invisible wound of abuse is a lack of trust. The invisible wound of abuse is a lack of trust. You see, when we read stories like this, it's of course very easy to pile on the Israelites. Look at them and their crazy talk. Look at how rude they are. Look at how God does all these miracles like over and over and over. But they're just constantly in a panic. Like, OMG, come on, people. How can you be so dense? But what are we missing? They aren't acting crazy at all. They're acting quite predictably. Remember, they have spent their entire lives in the context of abuse and mistreatment. And so the deep truth that has been ground down into their psyches is that you must scratch and claw and fight for survival. And if you rely on anyone, it is yourself and only yourself. You can trust you. That's it. Now, you might say, that is terrible for them. And yet you might also think like, well, but I mean, I'm glad I'm not like that. And yet I wonder if perhaps this invisible wound extends, a lot further than we often think. I mean, as we just discussed, it's like fairly obvious in, those who were raised in a situation of neglect or abuse, right? That we would struggle to trust. But what if, to a lesser but not insignificant degree, this is the invisible wound of countless others, perhaps to some degree, all of us? I think, for example, just of myself, like I was raised with no particular abuse or acute neglect in my childhood. I had pretty dang good parents and good friends. I had a good church community, right? And these people like weren't everyone wasn't perfect or something in my life, but it was good, I have no complaints. No authority figures ever abused me. So I should be a shining example of pure and open trust, right? Nope. I think if you ask those who like know me well, would you describe Brett as a super duper open, trusting person? I think they'd say, and what they're kind of hinting at is no, no. But if you ask me, like, bro, what's the matter, buddy? Like, where'd that come from? I don't know. I think I just kind of picked it up on my very human journey. See, it seems that to be human is to be fragile and vulnerable. To be human is to be sort of like the Israelites wandering through the desert, and our reaction to that vulnerability is that we build walls of emotional resistance to and distance from others rather than bridges of connection and healthy dependence on others. We build walls of emotional resistance to and distance from others rather than bridges of connection and healthy dependence on them. Now, I say healthy dependence because, of course, there is such a thing as codependence or over-dependence, right? This is where a person is so desperate for approval, so hungry for love that they have really little to no sense of identity, no sense of self outside of their connection to another person, like even if that person treats them horribly. So just to be clear, I'm not talking about becoming codependent. What we're describing here is this sort of space, this middle ground between, on the one hand, kind of an unhealthy codependence, and on the other, an almost cynical, I will not rely on others, I will not trust others, I will do it myself, I do not need anyone, I'm fine on my own. And, by the way, when you adopt that kind of posture, that actually may serve you somewhat well in some ways. I mean, you'll probably be very employable. For example, like you're going to be super responsible, get things done. I am reliable. Reliable person. It's on me. But your friendships will suffer. If you're married, your partner will suffer. And as you approach or enter into the second half of your life, you will increasingly have the sense that what you thought was a healthy skepticism of others, a healthy lack of trust, a healthy independence, was actually rooted in the soil of fear in past pain. And I think that's the key, right? It's rooted in this soil of fear, fear of being hurt. So what on earth can we do? We can partner. We can mutually rely. We can learn to mutually depend. We can do things together, right? Stop saying, I can do it on my own. We can ask for help without feeling guilty. We can begin to learn to lean on others. We could say things like, I could really use some support right now. Some of you would never say that in 1 billion years. I'm kind of one of those people. I could really use some support right now. Oh gosh, I get the chills just saying that out loud. um, what else? We could turn toward God and others, right, rather than away. It's kind of this posture of of a heart posture, turning toward God and others rather than away. So coming back to our Exodus passage, you can see that really this is the genius of again, not simply that God provided manna for his children, but how he provided it, right? It was a partnership. It was an exercise in trust. It was a nudge for this broken people to turn toward God, because every morning, right, he would provide. And every morning they would gather just what they needed. Just what they needed in trust, learning to form bonds of healthy dependence. There's a beautiful, beautiful episode that just came out on Netflix from the show Chef's Table. There's maybe like 5 fans of this show, and I don't think this is like a big hit, but I love this show. It's amazing. So their latest season is their barbecue edition. So they're like telling kind of basically stories of famous pit masters from all over the world. And what was kind of cool is I was delighted to find that the opening episode was about a Texan named, she has a great name. I think it's Tootsie? My kids, if they're watching this, they probably laugh. Tootsie Tomanetz. I think that's how you say her last name. And Scott has got an image here of Tootsie. She's amazing. She is greatness. As you can see, like can you just get kind of a feeling of a self-reliant woman here? Got the shovel, the fire in the background, because that's how she barbecues, right? Like legit wood fire. I mean, she's awesome. And so in this episode, it's a beautiful story, really well done. In the first 2/3 of the episode, it's basically a story of her self-reliance. And the way Chef's Table goes, it really tells it's the background story of that particular, chef or person, pitmaster. So I thought that would be the arc, is like, here she is, she's just an amazing person. And in the first 30 minutes, there's like lots of scenes, of her talking about her life of hard work and how like decades before her husband had a stroke. And so she works full time as a janitor during the week at the local high school. And then Friday night, literally all night, she barbecues, and she's the lead pit master at the #1 rated barbecue joint in Texas. And she's doing all of this at age 85. Like she's amazing. And there are tons of shots. Like you can tell how they're telling the story because there are lots of shots, like the image of her, the fire, like lots of shots of her standing alone, looking off into the distance with that kind of grizzled Texas look, a certain kind of a look in her eye, determination. And in every image, she's alone, like every single one. But then about 2/3 of the way through the episode, a shift happens because so the backstory is that because of the success of, it's called Snow's Barbecue, that's where she works. In the last 10 years or so, Tootsie has become just like very famous. People want to hug her. They want their picture with her, the famous Tootsie, But she was always like that. I mean, she's old Texas, so she's just gruff and distant and like, please get away from me. Just let me cook, let me do my thing. But then a few years back, tragedy struck her. Her husband, White, finally passed away in hospice care. And then just a short time later, her son, Hershey, also died from brain cancer. And this emotionally, it just completely destroyed her, because her identity had been built on caring for others, right? She was the one that people relied on, but no one, but she relied on no one else, right? She was the one who cared for others, and suddenly there was no one to care for, and truth be told, really no one even to care for her. And it was just too much to bear And so she begins to, I mean, she's just grieving. But of course, like Friday night, she's there working all night because it's just her life, just work, work, work. And she said this is a line from the episode. She said it was about 3 weeks, 4 weeks after Hershey's funeral. It's her son. And she said, the people had heard. And she says this all with like tears in her eyes. And it's amazing. You'll hear what these people say. It's like kind of just, almost not noteworthy. Like they're just kind of being nice. But for her, I mean, she had never had this in her life. She said, the people heard, and there were so many people who come to express their sympathy to me. She said, I had a gentleman come up to me and say, I'll always remember your son because he gave my 2 children each a silver dollar. Another person said, I'm so sorry for your loss. And she just says this with tears and amazement in her eyes and a small little smile on her face because she can't believe that people care about her and they care about her pain, that they want to walk with her. And this is where the shift happens. The next scene, a lady comes up to Tootsie while she's Tootsie's barbecuing and busy. And the lady says, I want to give you a kiss on the cheek. And as I'm watching this, I was like, oh no, Tootsie's going to punch her in the face. But no. Scott has this picture. Our grizzled pitmaster leans in, closes her eyes. Isn't that such a beautiful picture of trust and vulnerability? She just closes her eyes and she receives this kiss. And for the rest of the episode, the last third of the whole episode, it's basically Tootsie hugging on people, receiving their kisses. I mean, this is strangers. Kisses and support. And you're watching it like, what has happened to grizzled old self-reliant Texas Tootsie? She is turning into a big softie. And the last words in the episode, it closes with this. Tootsie said, through my whole life, I just always felt very independent. But after White and Hershey passed away, I learned that I had to call on someone to help me. I feel a lot of support when I'm down and out. I feel a connection. I really do. They're holding me up. They're walking with me. Now, of course, the truth is that our ultimate, deep trust cannot be other people because, people are people and they will let us down. In fact, I could imagine someone, kind of criticizing this message with like, hey, people have hurt me. And so I want to speak to that. Let me just kind of rip that Band-Aid off. Yes, that's true. People are people. In fact, even Pastor Brett, will let you down. If I haven't already, just wait. It's coming, probably next year or two. We'll relate enough. It'll happen, right? My wife, Maggie, all of your church leaders. Just go down the list. Your parents, your spouse, your best friends. They will let you down at some point. They will hurt you. They'll break your heart. They'll break your trust. And here's the thing. Before you start bemoaning their weakness, just remember, you're going to do the same to them. Which is why learning to trust other people, it's often our first almost baby steps into trust. But ultimately, we must graduate into a deep trust in God. Like the Israelites, we must learn at a soul level to trust, to rest, knowing that God has got us. I think immediately of Jesus' prayer in the Sermon on the Mount. He taught the Lord's Prayer that says, Our Father who is in heaven, holy be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our what? Our daily bread. What's that naming? We are learning to trust. Right? And it's not just about literal food. It's this heart posture of, okay, deep breaths. God has got me. And I know the season we're in, Some of you have been to hell and back. I've heard some of the stories of, on top of COVID and everything we're going through. But then there's layered on top of that is just personal tragedy of parents getting cancer. Some of you yourselves getting cancer. Like folks have been going through it. Some of you have experienced just a painful loneliness and isolation. And what I just want to name is that there's an invitation hiding in that. There's an invitation, learning to trust, to rest, knowing that God has got you. This is why the spiritual life is not one of independence, but interdependence. Learning to trust, learning both to hold others and perhaps more importantly, to be held by God, to be sustained. So turn towards, ask for help, knowing that God will provide just what you need. The manna won't run out. I promise you that. Can I pray for you? Lord Jesus, I lift up every person listening to my voice right now, and I ask that as a community, yes, we would learn to look to one another, but ultimately, Lord, teach us to look to you. Help us to be that people of deep, deep faith, knowing that you will come through, that you will provide, that the manna won't run out. God, whatever that manna is for us, whether it's energy, financial provision, a job, actual food, shelter, birthday gifts for our kids, mortgage payment, God, whatever we're having to trust you for. And may you make us a people who learn to trust, to have that deep wound healed. In the life-changing name of Jesus, I pray.